Hello, I'm Peter Landau, managing editor of Newsjunkie.net. Today I am with the publisher of Newsjunkie, Gordon Whiting, and we're talking about an article that was published in our most recent edition of the website called President Loses a Battle in His War on Libraries. Now, in that article, Gordon, you talk about the IMLS. Can you tell me what it is and what it does?
IMLS is the Institute for Museum and Library Services, and it is the largest and main federal agency for financial support, guidance, policy support, training for libraries and museums. And this is a substantial operation, 123,000 libraries across the country, 35,000 museums.
In your article, you frame this battle in a broader war on libraries. And how do you define the scope of that war? What's included and what's not included?
I don't know exactly what their strategy is, but they really don't like the idea of free inquiry. The federal government under Donald Trump in this term, since he retook the White House and was inaugurated on the 20th of January, it started immediately. And we're well known what DOJ did to various federal agencies, databases, and so forth, although it's still not completely documented, but the libraries are also a concern to them. Libraries and universities are also, we got a lot of news about universities being throttled in various ways, but essentially funding cuts for work they were doing mainly in the scientific and health sectors. So what's on their mind when they're doing this? Multiple things, certainly not least of which is just sheer intimidation of a power sector that isn't them. Who's the boss? We can hurt you, and we're going to. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is just the ideology that too much is eroding the American system and all that wokeness is hurting us, and it's in the libraries, it's in the schools, it's everywhere. We're going to just go for the jugular and shut that stuff down.
This was a win for the library system and for the American public, but how meaningful was it structurally versus symbolically?
It's very meaningful. The most important thing is that it shows he can't get away with it and that the system of justice does work. The system of justice that we've come to doubt. They moved incredibly fast with terrific purpose. And to quote Mark Zuckerberg, move fast and break things. And they certainly did. But now you have a pushback. Reinstating the staff, restoring the funds and the activities of the agency. That's unequivocal. You can't get away with it. Wheels may turn slowly. In this case, it was pretty fast. It was about it.
The settlement, as you just said, restored funding and the staff, but what does the case actually set for future executive actions?
I mean, they're going to probably keep doing it. The thing is, they don't have as many targets. Can they keep going through with the scimitar, lopping off the heads of the funding of agencies? Yeah, I guess so. And then courts and lawsuits and advocates will push back and maybe win. But they've creamed off some of the really rich targets. What does it mean? I'm not sure they're taking any lesson from it. I doubt it. I don't see any evidence that they're mending the error of their ways.
What about from the other side? The legal strategy that was used by the American Library Association and the AFSCME, is it possibly a blueprint for other actions from other agencies?
Sure. Every lawsuit has its differences, but in this case, they basically said nothing changed in the mandate. There was no the operation was doing what it was supposed to do. The executive order is very interesting. It's titled Continuing the Reduction of the Federal Bureaucracy. And it's understood that the federal bureaucracy must continue to be reduced. It's a hobby horse of people that complain about bloat in the government. And certainly there's got to be bloat in any organization, and there's bloat in the government. But bureaucracy is not a bad word. It's not a bad concept. It's become a bad word. Bureaucracy is there to basically be a counterweight to people like Donald Trump, basically to kings and monarchs, where somebody in some ivory tower had a say over whether you could get a business license or do something or move between municipalities or something like that. You had to get the favor of that authority. And the bureaucracy leveled it out so that the high and low had to pass through that same system. Sure, it slowed things down. Sure, there are people that seem not interested in your particular case, but that had the leveling effect. That was the intended effect. That's why it exists. So this naming of it as the continuing of the reduction of the federal bureaucracy, and then it goes and just lays waste to 7 key organizations, including Voice of America, including the Agency for Global Media. Global media, yeah, that is not only Voice of America, which, that's been pushed back. That's been somewhat restored. It's Radio Free Europe. It also has very interesting initiatives that it supports, including Open Internet. It's part of the U.S. Agency for Global Media. And what does it support? Efforts to counter censorship in places where it exists in the world. Efforts for an open internet. Free access to the internet, open access to the internet in those troubled places around the world. And that is the very type of thing they don't like even here. And so far, we have open access to the internet. But even the wording in this initiative that is trying to be defunded through this executive order is how to circumvent censorship. In other words, how to beat the governments that have their boot on the neck of the people around the world. That was the law that they've said was unnecessary. That is part of this. It's not just cutting libraries. It is a broad attack, and it's ideologically driven. It's not savings driven. It uses bureaucracy as some sort of evil term. And most people think of bureaucracy as not cool. That's why they use the term. But in and of itself, it actually serves an important purpose in a democracy.
Getting back to the case itself and the judgment, do you see it as a demonstration that legal safeguards work, or is it an anomaly?
I think there's a lot of reasons to be upset about our system, but it worked, so it can work. Let's keep it working.
And how does the case fit into the broader pattern of executive actions targeting cultural and knowledge institutions?
How does it fit in? It's a front and center assault. It doesn't exist because it advances some corporate agenda. It's a public good. It's a public service. Again, I don't mean to fall back on it. I don't have a fall back on the idea that part of it is just to say we can do it. There seems to be a lot of this sort of enjoyment of laying down the sledgehammer on things to show that you're not safe.
So do you think the administration expected to lose in court? Maybe their goal was not to win the case, but something else.
This is the funniest president because by all reporting, he didn't expect to win the presidency in 2016, wasn't ready and didn't have a transition team together. I think that kind of informs everything. They don't ever think past tomorrow. They go on gut. He does, and his team. Some of them are quite sophisticated with their planning, like Russell Vought and Project 2025, of which this is clearly a part. But did they expect to win? Didn't they expect to lose? I think they just expected to do it, and then they didn't care after that. And probably they maybe thought they would eventually lose. But if you move fast and break things, maybe it does the job you wanted to do. I don't really know.
But why did they choose the libraries as a target to break things?
Like I said, you can't have that free and open exchange, that independent inquiry where you can expand and enlarge yourself, find out things, look at the public record, look at history, read queer science fiction or whatever that might be dangerous to them. And they're thinking about how people should conform. Everybody's going to have a thought about why they did it, but I think it's largely just we're going to do it. It's an easy target. We can really hurt them quickly. Let's do it. The same executive order and Voice of America. Why would you cut Voice of America? Why? I don't know.
I'm curious about the consequences of attacking these institutions, even if a court sides with the libraries, as they did in this case. What are these long-term consequences? Are these institutions weakened even temporarily?
There's a lot of it's psychological, psych warfare. It's people give up on the idea of access. Everybody's busy with their lives, and so our library closed. It's a shell of what it used to be, and maybe this media outlet is no longer there, or the public airwaves. We had NPR and PBS get hit. And so you what am I going to do about it? So you end up with less choice. And when the field narrows, when you narrow the field, you don't have to work as hard. Libraries are ways for people to kind of get around your message.
In terms of the broader issue of access to information and public memory, how does this battle connect to the larger war?
There's a very concerted and strong effort to rewrite the story of January 6th and make it the story of committed patriots doing everything they could and nearly succeeding in saving the country against a stolen election, which is a lie. In fact, it's the big lie. You need to be able to cut off the truth in order to sell the lie. It's a big, complex country with big, complex information system. But they're choosing things very wisely about how to hit and cause compromise. So this is an important story in that regard.
While you were reporting on the story, what came up that surprised you?
Reporting, it's really commentary on other reporting. Primarily, Boston Herald had an excellent piece on it. I think it was the directness of their approach, which was we didn't do anything wrong. There was no deterioration of service. It serves its purpose. It was mandated by law, and it's an overreach to do what you did. And the court agreed. So it was a simple, they didn't have to pull out every card trick to win it. I found that, I don't know, if not surprising, refreshing.
Now, part of Newsjunkie is our Prairie Fire Project, which is about data removal, censorship, changes in the federal information system. So this story locks into that pretty tightly, I would say. So what should journalists be, and the public, be watching next in this space?
There's a DOJ memo that was fairly recently that the Presidential Records Act, a federal law, is unconstitutional. We're not going to keep every memo and letter or phone log, who came to the White House. We're not required to do that. We're just telling you, this is unconstitutional. We're not going to do it anymore. Again, this kind of impunity is a hallmark of their behavior, because after all, they're public servants. We have a system for what is supposed to be done. And if the law has got any kind of question to it at all, it should be adjudicated in the court.
It certainly helps them shape the narrative in the way they want it to be told. So with that,
there's a case coming up, which is another lawsuit, the American Historical Association v. Trump, saying those presidential record acts is a part of what we do in this country. And you're not to just unilaterally tear that up and stop doing it.
That leads into my next question. That's one example of what local journalists and researchers can do to these shifts that are occurring under our feet. Do you have any other advice for journalists and researchers?
Oh, don't give up. One, rally people, encourage people to write letters, send emails, phone calls to their legislators, to the White House, too. It isn't nothing to do that. What should a journalist do? Obviously, keep writing and doing the ground reporting, but also rally people. If you think this is wrong, get in touch with your Congress people and your president. They do pay attention, especially when it starts to mass. These emails and letters and calls start to mass toward the period where there's going to be an election. It's worth a try. That's all I could say.
Before I let you go, if you had to summarize the real stakes of this story, just in one sentence, beyond funding and staffing, what would it be?
It was what I said. I think it shows he can't get away with it. It's important to know that. He's gotten away with a lot. Just such a long list. And we get inured and numb and dumbed down. You can't get away with it. Not every time. And eventually there's going to be a reckoning. This is one piece of that. So that's my word on that.
Thank you, Gordon. If listeners or viewers want to follow that reckoning, I suggest that they come to newsjunkie.net, where we are covering the story deeply, and they can get more there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.